My name is Bruce Director. Thank you for joining us for this Saturday night class, LaRouche Pack class, on this third night of Hanukkah. And this will be the beginning of a four-part series that Tony and I will be doing two this week and next week. Then we'll take a break for the Christmas, New Year's holiday, and we'll return in the new year with the final two classes on the subject of LaRouche's economics. This is a very big subject, as you will find out in the course of tonight's presentation. So we're going to be doing this a little bit differently than some of the other presentations we've done, in which we'll do it both as a dialogue between me and Tony, and then we will bring you, the listener, in to participate in the dialogue, because as you'll find out very soon, that LaRouche's economics probably raises more questions than answers, but those are the key questions on which the future of this country and civilization depends. And I think you'll get the sense of that in the course of our discussion. So I'm going to ask Tony to begin with an introduction, and then I'll have some things to say, and we'll go back and forth and bring you in.
Thanks, Bruce. Long ago in 1948, Lyndon LaRouche became acquainted, one of the first to become acquainted, because he had a first edition of Wiener's book, one of the first to become acquainted with Norbert Wiener's book, Cybernetics, and his dogmas of artificial intelligence and statistical information theory. And this Wiener's approach can be gone into in more detail than I intend to do right now. We may do that in subsequent classes if it's relevant. But in essentials, just like the artificial intelligence of today, which is just the direct descendant of Wiener's dogma, he believed that machines can be made to think like human beings. And the statistical information theory part of it, which came in part from Claude Shannon, a researcher at Bell Labs at the time, said that the information content of utterances, or let's say of communications, could be determined by statistical means, particular statistical formulas they used, called statistical information theory. Now, when LaRouche first encountered this in 48, he thought it was interesting, worth discussing. But he quickly, over a course of weeks, began to see the deep evil in artificial intelligence, statistical information theory, and devoted enormous efforts to refuting it, because he thought that this had to be done in the interests of humanity, the United States. So he set about to refute Wiener's information theory. And in the course of doing so, and you'll see to some extent why that's true, in the course of doing so, he made his fundamental economic discovery during the period. This didn't all happen in 48, but during the period between 48 and 51 or 52, he made his fundamental economic discovery, which really, he developed it in many ways, but this governed the rest of his life, because it's the kind of discovery which not only reshaped, in some respects, history, reshaped the United States, but it reshaped the discoverer, LaRouche, and he became, through that discovery, he became a great economist. Now, I mean, so how to disprove the doctrine that machines can think? Or I would say the dogma, because of course machines never have thought, so it's a dogma that they never have, but someday or other they will. What the test LaRouche used as an economist was the test of economics itself, which is the subject of this 4-week course. Animals do not have economies. Animals do not have economics. Only man has economy. Only man has economics. And what is it? In LaRouche's terms, as was true for such scientists as Hamilton, Friedrich List, the German economist, before him, economy is not money. Economy is man's reshaping of nature and himself in the interests of the improvement of the human race over generations, over time. And through human race, the improvement of the world and the universe, as God laid out to us, instructed us in Genesis. And what has that meant? In rough terms, it's meant that if we take man way back, probably 2 million years, even though I know there's anthropologists who will say that's too long a period, but if we take man back perhaps 2 million years to a theoretical hunter-gatherer society, which had no settled abode, no agriculture, which followed edible plants and huntable animals to survive, and which of necessity had extremely low life expectancies, perhaps under 20, we would think, and was extremely sparsely settled on the land because of the need to have supplies of edible animal and vegetables available for this kind of theoretical hunting gathering. In that circumstance, LaRouche estimated that the total population which the entire Earth could sustain, and of course many areas which are habitable for man today would not be habitable for such a hunter-gatherer society, that the total Earth's population of hunter-gatherers could not amount to more than 10 million human beings, less than the population of a major city today. And today, we have successively revolutionized nature, our habits, our food production, our manufacture, our health, our nutrition. And we've changed the features of the Earth. Some of our changes can be seen even from the moon. So that with all these progressive changes by man over perhaps 2 million years, there are 8 billion human beings living today on a planet that when we first got here, so to speak, could have supported only 10 million of us. So, I mean, this is one way of looking at the total uniqueness of the human species. Is there any animal which can do that? No. No animal does that. No animal changes nature and itself progressively better and better from generation to generation. It's outside the ability of animals. And then, I mean, no animal can do it. Could a machine do it? I mean, my answer would be obviously not. But we'll get more into that. Maybe people have to say about it in discussion. So that was Lynn's economic demonstration in a nutshell, admittedly. I mean, there's a lot more to it. He spent, as I said, 3 or so years developing his refutation of Wiener, and we'll have a lot more to say about it, both today and in subsequent classes. But I guess to put it in a nutshell, that's the refutation of artificial intelligence, which Lynn saw, as I said earlier, as a unique evil that had to be overcome and defeated. And it just shaped his life for 3 years, and in a sense, his life till his death in early 2019 by that struggle. He said that struggle to refute Wiener is what really made him an economist. Now, the other aspect of Wiener is, and this is a major subject which I think Bruce will begin to introduce after I finish, but the other closely related fight with Wiener was on the question of entropy and negative entropy. The second law of thermodynamics, which is a fraud, says that entropy, and we could call it disorder. Of course, there's a mathematical definition, or there's several mathematical definitions, but entropy, otherwise disorder, continually increases in the universe. And yet, of course, we have the obvious fact that in the case of life, when living beings reduce the amount of disorder, aka entropy. I mean, think that is an obvious example. I mean, an acorn grows in a forest over decades, I guess, until it becomes a huge oak tree, perhaps 2 feet in diameter or more. The material of which today is the huge oak tree, existed as disorderly, random, in other words, entropy in the soil, in the water, until it became organized in this great, unified, orderly structure, low entropy structure of a mighty oak tree. So if entropy is everywhere increasing, how is it that entropy in the growth of an oak tree or any living thing, whether it's a bacterium or even a virus or an oak tree or a human being, their development and growth is a case of continual decrease of entropy, aka disorder. Now, believers in the dogma of the second law of thermodynamics and statistical mechanics, which Wiener was, say that the growth of order and the loss of entropy in a living being is only, so to speak, a temporary borrowing from the universe, which continues its increase in entropy or disorder, despite the case of this living being, which in any case will die. I mean, I was just reading Wiener's book, Cybernetics, the one that Lynn picked up in 1948, before this show. And he said that the organism shows a decrease in entropy, but this is merely a metastable state. It quickly passes. The only stable state of a living thing is death. So that was his. That was one of his discussions. But Bruce assembled some quotes of Wiener on this. Maybe he could introduce at least one of them right now to make the point clearer.
Yeah, well, here's one that goes directly to what you said. We are immersed in a life in which the world as a whole obeys the second law of thermodynamics. Confusion increases and order decreases. Yet, as we have seen, the second law of thermodynamics, while it may be a valid statement about the whole of a closed system, is definitely not valid concerning non-isolated parts of it. There are local and temporary islands of decreasing entropy. Hang on a second. In a world in which entropy as a whole tends to increase, and the existence of these islands enables some of us to assert the existence of progress. What can we say about the general direction of the battle between progress and increasing entropy in the world immediately about us? Well, I'll tell you what he says we can say about it. He says, progress imposes not only new possibilities for the future, but new restrictions. It seems almost as if progress itself and our fight against the increase of entropy intrinsically must end in the downhill path from which we are trying to escape. May we have the courage to face the eventual doom of our civilization as we have the courage to face the certainty of our personal doom. The simple faith in progress is not a conviction belonging to strength, but one belonging to acquiescence and hence to weakness.
Yeah, so I mean, you begin to get a sense, because I didn't give you quotes, you begin to get a sense of what this man was like and how Lyndon LaRouche became aware over a course of a few weeks in 1948 of the innate evil of the dogmas of artificial intelligence, statistical information theory, and the related, which is very closely related, because statistical mechanics, the related dogma of the second law of thermodynamics. Now, on another aspect of it, the statistical information theory, as I said, claim to be able to determine the information content of an utterance or a signal, whatever they want to call it, based on statistical measurements. But LaRouche said that was unacceptable to him because you look at this progress of our species, as I described it a minute ago, from really somewhat baboon-like hunter-gatherers to what we have become over maybe 2 million years today. How did we do it? Well, most fundamentally, we did it. Well, we did it through, we did it through scientific and technological progress in so many ways, beginning in legend, but I think in reality with the conquest of fire, or perhaps we've never finally conquered fire, but the use of fire by mankind. All animals flee from fire. There's no animal which uses fire. Mankind, which is above the animals, uses fire and has since the dawn of prehistory. And what Lyndon LaRouche used to say was, if you go to the the cave dwellings of hominids, i.e., human-like creatures, and they died hundreds of thousands of years ago, were they humans or not? And what Lynn said is, look for the hearth, look for the ashes, look for the fireplace, look for the use of fire, which has always marked man out, as in the Greek myth of Prometheus, who brought fire to raise humanity to its human status, if you like, and fire designating really not just fire, although fire is so many things. What is fire? It's not a thing. It's a process. It's an immaterial process. It resembles, in that respect, the process of thought. And what was fire? Well, fire through various forms, through wood, through charcoal, through coal, through petroleum, metallurgy, ceramics, pottery, and then the fire today of nuclear energy, the fire of fusion energy, and ultimately, or perhaps not ultimately, but sometime in the future, the fire of matter-antimatter reactions is the process which has accompanied man from the beginning as we evolve it, accompanied man like the dog, as the Greeks said. So it's that, but what is behind it? What is behind it is ideas. What enables us to progress is the production of better, superior ideas. And the communication of these ideas, whether from the discoverer or from, a later person who came across the ideas, and so to LaRouche, communication was not a statistical phenomenon. That human communication is human communication to the degree it's related to the work of mankind in Genesis, in continuing God's creation under the Creator. These are ideas, these are the contents of communication. And so communication is not statistical. Communication is purposive, like everything else in life. I mean, beyond mankind, all life is purposive. That defines it, contrary to Wiener, who understands nothing of this. And the purpose of language, like the purpose of everything we do, is the good or the greater good as seen in our improvement of ourselves and of the universe. So to LaRouche, the statistical information theory was false because information is not statistical. Information cannot be determined from the details of the message. Information is determined by the purpose and use of the message within this context. So he refuted statistical information theory at the same time. And then, but what does this say? This is a much bigger story than even mankind. What does the story say about the universe? It says it's a universe which has produced mankind with this ability, unique among living things. And it's a universe which responds to mankind's ideas or discoveries as we discover them, as we communicate them. So the story of man, viewed in this way, and it admittedly told in very cursorily, but hopefully what I've said is true. The story of man is the truth of the universe, which cannot be evaded. This is not an entropic universe. It's demonstrated by what we've done as a species over millions of years. So the entirety of Wiener's dogma is false. And I'm sure that there's a lot more to say about it, but hopefully, in brief compass, that's truthful. And that was the start of Lyndon LaRouche's public career as a scientist and statesman, that battle with Norbert Wiener. Again, more could be said, but I'd like to pass it over to Bruce, if I may.
Well, a lot more will be said, but what you said really brings up a lot of very important questions that are necessary, or thoughts that are necessary to begin this effort that we're going to be making over the coming period, and starting with tonight, in trying to understand what we mean by economy. It's often difficult, of course, to try and define economy, but one of the things I think we have to attack is the reductionist thinking that we've all been trained in, and which is sort of seen as a standard a procedure in any discussion, whether it's about science or whether it's about politics or whether it's about something like we're trying to discuss in this tonight and in the coming weeks on the question of what is economy. You try and start with a definition, which is precisely the issue that Lynn took with Wiener, and of course it's something that philosophers have struggled with over millennia. When you start to pull on the thread of what you laid out as what is economy, I guess we could start as a general concept, as you indicated, that it's man fulfilling his role or his necessary role in the God's ongoing creation of the universe, which I don't think really serves as a definition, but as a suggestion of the kind of things one has to consider when we think about economy and economics. Of course, that's a far cry from what people generally can think of when they hear the term economics today. But I think it's on that level that we, as people who want to try and influence the direction of the United States and also the world in a towards progress, as opposed to what Wiener said, that it's not futile. But I would argue, as LaRouche did, that progress is a necessary characteristic of the universe, and that correlates with another characteristic given man's unique role in fulfilling this requirement to participate in God's creation, to fulfill our role in God's creation, which is unique, as Tony indicated, that requires that we have to consider in our understanding of economics basically everything in the universe. So in the course of this class, a lot of times people say, well, economics is not this. It's not money, it's not finance, it's not manufacturing, it's not production. Then you say, what is it? Then you try and give it some logical definition and you're sort of lost altogether. But as soon as you pull the thread on what LaRouche defined as economics, you see that you sort of go touch on everything in the universe, and many of these things are things that we're going to have to review and at least begin to wrestle with in the course of this discussion tonight and over the next few weeks. So this is obviously just introductory, but and that means we have to know about the physics of the universe. We have to know about the nature of life. We have to investigate and develop and improve our knowledge of basic physics, geology, biology, astrophysics, and then to do that, we also have to improve our knowledge of our own mind, how our own minds work. What are we doing when we're making conceptions or developing ideas? And that requires an understanding of art, poetry, music, and how what actual real communication is. And LaRouche always emphasized this, and maybe you can put up that 9-cell grid. This is a heuristic device that LaRouche used very early on in his early classes back in the 60s and 70s of economics. It goes by the name of the 9-cell grid. And if you look on the, to sort of break down what I mean when you're thinking about economics, what is the phase space we're talking about? What is the actual physical geometry that in which economics actually exists? So you see down on the left side, you have three different characteristics of action: abiotic, biotic, and cognitive, which I think are at least easy to understand the distinction between them, although the boundaries between them are not fixed. It's very clear that there are certain characteristics of abiotic systems which distinguish them from living processes. And V.I. Vernadsky, the great Russian biogeochemist, explored this, as well as Louis Pasteur, who was a predecessor of Vernadsky. And this is a very wide subject that you have to look at. What is the difference between the abiotic, biotic, and cognitive domains? But they're all connected, right? Because biotic systems are always interacting with abiotic systems. Vernadsky coined the term biogenic the biogenesis, transmission of atoms. What's the term, Tony?
I think biogenetic transmission of atoms, but
yeah,
something like that. Yeah,
something like that, where you have a living system, and of course this is one distinction between a living system and a non-living system, is that living systems all have a boundary. They always occur within some type of boundary, an inside and an outside. And there's a transmission of atoms from inside the living system to outside the living system. There's no boundary in a non-living system. Rocks sort of go on forever. Crystals can grow. But as there's this migration between the living and the non-living, the chemistry of the living is in the living system is different than the chemistry in the non-living system. You also have a different atomic characteristic, which is just beginning to be investigated in terms of the way in which, on the micro scale, the living electromagnetism, light, and other things are function within a living system is different than within an abiotic system. And then you have the cognitive processes, which exist in all animals to some degree, but in man it's unique. But those cannot be separated from the biological substrate. You don't have ideas and creative discovery outside of the existence of a real biological person. People live and die, and the great ideas on which civilization is based are all associated with an individual living person, even if you may not even know who those people are. For example, if it's an ancient discovery that's not necessarily attributed to a single person. So you have those distinctions, and then you have across the top, you have a distinction of scale: microphysical, macrophysical, and astrophysical. So that gives rise to this 9-cell grid, which sort of describes the phase space in which for physical economy. So you can just sort of imagine this in your own mind, the kind of interactions: microphysical, abiotic, subatomic processes and microprocesses; macrophysical, things we considered like mechanics and so forth; astrophysical. But then you have microphysical biotic processes. I described some of those. Macrophysical biotic processes, the morphology of living systems and ecologies, and astrophysical.
So just to let people be clear, if they're confused by the words. So the columns: abiotic is, in other words, non-living; biotic is living; cognitive is, thinking. And then Microphysical, okay, it's the micro scale, presumably invisible to the eye. Macrophysical is considered to be the physical scale on which we, see each other, live, walk around, and stuff like that. And astrophysical, right, the huge space scale of the stars.
Right. And so in the macrophysical, in the astrophysical biotic interactions, these are the obvious interactions between astrophysical processes and living systems. This includes everything from the navigation of birds by the stars, or bees by the polarization of light, or photosynthesis, or the interaction of living systems with other cosmic processes like cosmic rays and so on and so forth. And these are all complete. Our knowledge of any of these interactions is very incomplete right now. And then you also have the bottom row of the same thing as it relates to the power of cognition. So I thought this is very good pedagogy that LaRouche developed to sort of expand your mind into the kinds of interactions that you have to think about when you're in order to understand or to think about, get a concept of economics. And there you can see that what goes generally as economics studies of economics is why it's wildly wrong most of the time is because it limits the interactions to things which are really not essential, when these are the real essential interactions. The interactions of buying and selling of people in a market, whether it's a financial market or whether it's a farmer's market or whatever, is not adequate to understand the actual economic process. Because if you take any of those local interactions and you start to think about them, they involve these kinds of large scale interactions on a much more fundamental level. So in this course, I think what I hope we can do is at least touch on some of these types of interactions to at least get us started on the kinds of things that economists or people who want to get the population to think about economics in the right way can focus on. Now, that brings up the other question, which I think which Tony introduced, which is very important to LaRouche, which is this question of communication. And I don't think we need to keep that up on the screen, unless you do. But is this question of communication. So Wiener, as Tony indicated, and LaRouche was very focused on this, that communication can be reduced to some statistical idea. And this, of course, has even gotten expanded much wilder than probably even Wiener would have imagined, in this whole idea of what today people call information theory, which is central to a lot of the reductionist thinking in modern science. Almost everything is considered as information. And this has led to a real, what I think is a sort of psychosis, not just in the population, but also in the scientific community as well. But you have, and this also expresses itself in this idea of what people call artificial intelligence, which is not intelligence at all. It's simply a very large mechanical process. And here's something which I think people really is like a magician's trick, which is rooted in an ancient problem going all the way back to Aristotle, that you hear in this artificial intelligence dogma, or what people accept today, that there's somehow two things, software and hardware. that the software are the instructions and the hardware is the machine which carries out the instructions. So if you can get the machine to write instructions, ultimately then somehow you have something which is the equivalent to a human being. Now, that's just a fallacy because there is no information outside of the physical substrate that supposedly is the bearer of the information. There's no big book of mathematical formulas, which is the software of the universe, on which all the behavior of the universe exists. Because as Tony said, the universe is fundamentally creative. This is what LaRouche emphasized. It's fundamentally creative. It creates new things. And those new things are not known even to the universe itself until they're created. And just like human beings create new things, first we create them as ideas. Leonardo da Vinci conceived of many machines long before they were built. And when did those machines come into existence? When did the helicopter come into existence? You know, when Leonardo da Vinci conceived of the idea of a helicopter or any of his other machines which were not developed in his time. That's just as an example. So that you have a connection, direct connection between thought, which appears to be immaterial, but never exists outside of a material body, an actual living human being, and the transformation or the application of the implications of that thought to a physical transformation of the universe itself. So these are the kinds of things you have to think about when you're thinking about economics. So when you're talking about economic policy, you're talking about affecting all these things. And that includes, culture, what goes into the ability to improve the ability to think and to make discoveries of the people in society, and how to apply and maximize the application of those discoveries to the improvement of mankind. Now, machines are not going to do that. And it's sort of a crazy idea to think that somehow, if you given the power of a compute and application of huge amounts of electricity, that somehow the turning it on and off of electronic switches on the microphysical level is somehow going to produce ideas is just patently absurd. And frankly, I think a lot of it's being hyped up for financial reasons. On the other hand, the use of machines to regulate other machines can be quite useful. And LaRouche talked about this in some of his early writings in economics on automation. Now, of course, the automation that he was dealing with in the 50s was a lot simpler to understand than the computer automation. But he referred to that, and later in his life, he wrote a paper, I think in 1980 or 2000, I can't remember, called Systems Analysis as White-Collar Genocide. And he also wrote a paper, which Tony pointed out in 1985, on the fraud of artificial intelligence. And he made the point that the use of automated systems as control systems and to moderate machines is quite beneficial to human beings. But the idea of using machines to control human behavior is monstrously evil and has to really be destroyed. And it is not, and the effort to do that, in my view, is, and I think LaRouche's, is a complete fool's errand. So therefore, LaRouche said we have to really think about what real communication is. And you have, I just interject here parenthetically that there's a small, but I think significant number of scientists who are confronting the failure of this information systems and reductionist theory in science, because it doesn't explain anything. Some of these are biologists and chemists. I'm referring particularly, there's a Dr. Lee Cronin and another woman out at the University of Arizona, or Arizona State University, Sarah Walker, who's an astrobiologist. They are working on efforts to break free of reductionist thinking. There are others, but the good thing about what they're doing is they're raising these questions and they're coming up with some approaches. The difficulty they're having is fully embracing the idea that the universe is fundamentally creative and investigating what that actually means. What does it mean to be a creative universe? And I think that's what I hope we're going to be able to discuss further in these discussions. But as LaRouche pointed to, and I think Dan Leach presented this in one of his classes, that this requires, if you're not going to be bound by a reductionist mathematical approach to science, how do we approach answering or even thinking about some of the questions which Tony and I have already raised? So I'm going to read you a quote from Percy Bysshe Shelley's Defense of Poetry.
Yeah, let me put it up.
Yeah, put it up. Which I think.
Oh, sorry, I haven't actually put it up.
Go ahead.
I have to share screen. Share screen.
LaRouche wrote a very provocative paper in the 1970s called "Poetry Must Supersede Mathematics and Science," which caused people to be very to raise this question. But I'll read you this section from Defense of Poetry, or two quotes from it. Poetry is indeed something divine. It is at once the center and circumference of knowledge. It is that which comprehends all science, and that to which all science must be referred. It is at the same time the root and blossom of all other systems of thought. It is that from which all spring, and that which adorns all, and that which, if blighted, denies the fruit and the seed, and withholds from the barren world the nourishment and the succession of the scions of the tree of life. Could the influence be durable in its original purity and force, it is impossible to predict the greatness of the results. But when composition begins, inspiration is already on the decline, and the most glorious poetry that has ever been communicated to the world is probably a feeble shadow of the original conceptions of the poet. So when in thinking about economics and the ideas we need to comprehend the understanding of economics as LaRouche did, and as we must, if we're going to progress, we have to bear this guidance in mind, that the progress, or the progress, occurs through the generation of ideas, which is only the first step. The second step has to be, how do we communicate those ideas? And inevitably, as Shelley says, even the most glorious poetry that has ever been communicated to the world is probably a feeble shadow of the original conceptions of the poet. When composition begins, inspiration is already on the decline. So this is a real struggle, which I think the only way you can overcome it is in this kind of dialogue process that we're hoping to initiate tonight.
Right. Terrific.